Okay, I'm going to embarrass Kamal for a second. All right, so what's the brand that Align Technologies owns? Invisalign. All right, everybody smile. Come on. Honestly, the biggest smiles. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Okay, cool.
I love that everybody knew that. That's awesome.
Thank you, because that would have been awkward.
Well, how fun is it to be here today? And as Sarah mentioned, one of the things I really love about the Brand Innovators community is the community aspect. And Sarah and I have known each other for a while. Jason and I have known each other for a little bit. So I'm really excited to come back in a face-to-face event capacity and bring back the community aspect of what makes the marketing world so fun.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you very much for being here. So for those that don't know me, I'll introduce myself. I'm Jason Edelman. Based in Los Angeles. I head up our West Coast operations for our member services team. For those that don't know, Brand Innovators has a in-house advisory and consulting practice, and our goal is basically to help all the marketers involved in Brand Innovators around the country as successful as possible to kind of get you a little bit more involved in the Brand Innovators community, helping you identify partners. So actually for Poshmark, I have an idea for you to help you satisfy some of that. So we can talk about that after. And we also have a lot of different marketing leadership councils based on various disciplines. Kamal has been part of our Innovation Advisory Council for many years and is also on our Marketing Leadership Council, which is a bunch of heads of marketing and CMOs from around the country. So lots of great things to further get involved in Brand Innovators. So feel free to reach out, grab me at any point today. So thank you for being here. Kamal was one of a few of you I know that took about an hour journey from the San Jose area to be with us. So thank you so much for the effort in doing so. We've known each other for about 4 years now, and it's been a privilege to get to know you. But you're also celebrating your 9th anniversary this month at Align. I'd love for you to share. First talk about, introduce what you do, what you oversee at the company, and then specifically, I'm kind of interested in how you guys are showing up across your various target audiences, because you're very unique in that you're both a B2B and a B2C brand. Audiences include both teens and parents, but then you also have doctors. So, how do you kind of juggle that as a marketing leader on a kind of very broad scale?
Sure. So a lot packed in there. Let's make sure that I hit all aspects of that. I think first and foremost, setting the stage for how our business works, right? Jason said it best. We are a B2B to C company. We are not a DTC company. And what that means is really we're creating awareness and education and hopefully excitement in the marketplace with consumers to inspire them to straighten their teeth with Invisalign as their key choice. Our goal then is to get that consumer, whether it's a parent, a teenager, or an adult, to walk into a doctor's office near them, a dentist or an orthodontist, and talk to their dentist or orthodontist about Invisalign, right? So right now, I've been at Align, yes, for 9 years. It's a little unbelievable to think that the 9-year anniversary is here. And one of the reasons that I've stayed so long at Align is just because of how innovative and exciting and multidimensional this business really is. Currently, I am overseeing all of the brand development, the brand strategy, and the consumer experience and marketing around the globe, and have been in that role for about 2.5 years. So I think the next part of Jason's question becomes a really interesting one, and that is how do you balance all of the different audiences, and how do you balance the consumer aspect along with the doctor audience? And the reality is that you've got to do both. I always say that our business is an and business, right? Sarah knows this well from working together with me for a number of years, and that is that we can't just do one. It's equally important for us to raise the awareness with the consumers as it is for us to educate and partner with doctors around the world and help them understand how to utilize Invisalign as a part of their practice to achieve their goals, whatever those goals may be. So I think I tackled all aspects of your question, but if I didn't, let me know.
And I think we'll probably weave in some more of that further in the conversation. And then, also I'm just curious, within the time that you have been with the company, obviously there's so many technologies that have, popped up, new platforms. Does that make it harder to reach the audiences because they're more distracted and they have more marketing messages than ever? Or do new technologies and platforms make it easier to connect with those consumers?
Yeah, it's, I'll say there's two pieces to this. I'd say it's harder in that we are very much living in the attention economy, right? Getting consumers' attention and getting them to engage with your brand is a right that we have to earn that has been harder than it ever has been before. And as new technologies continue to come about, as new platforms continue to emerge, it's just going to get harder, right? Now, at the same time, I'll say what is old is new again, right? The basics of marketing haven't changed, and that is that we are here to inspire and win the hearts and minds of the people that we are hoping to come into some sort of relationship with the brand, right? And so I think one of the things that's become harder is for us as marketers to have the discipline to say no. As new exciting technologies or platforms emerge, the easiest thing to do is to jump in and say, I need to be there too, right? The harder thing to do, and as leaders, one of the things that we absolutely have to do is to say, maybe not right now. Maybe that's not the right place for me right now because I need to ensure that I'm winning in the channels that we are in right now. And so much of that, I think, becomes a media conversation and a technology conversation. And somebody said this on the panel earlier, which I really loved, is let's not forget that creative plays such an important role, right? I always say media drives creative and creative drives media. It has to be a two-way street and a closed loop bi-directional conversation, because you could be in the best platform ever, and if your creative is not making the cut, if it's not inspiring, engaging, thumb-stopping, it's not the platform's fault. Right. Let's take a harder look at that creative.
Right, and oftentimes people are not developing their creative based on the distribution, all right? And then the fit is not there. That's obviously another topic we can get into. Well, what I'm curious about is whether you want to talk about maybe the last year, the last 2 years, or, let's look at first quarter of 2020 when we all kind of were put under lockdown. And your brand is pretty unique, right? It's in the health and wellness space. There are some things that are a little recession-proof or pandemic-proof, and some that are not. I'm curious as to maybe over the last, if you want to speak to the last year or if it's 2 years, is there like one tactic that you've adopted that's been new, or is there maybe something that you've done internally within the operations of the marketing team that has proven to be successful and has led to the sustained growth of the company that you would like to share?
Yeah, and I think there's two things that come to mind, right? The first is operating as one team with your entire partner community as well. And so that's inclusive of your media teams, that's inclusive of your creative teams, and then your platform partners, right? Whether it's Meta, whether it's YouTube, all those channel partners that you're spending your money in, get them to the table, immerse the team in your business overall so that everybody is as versed in your business as your team collectively is, so that the best media, the best creative, all of the bests really come to life. I'd say that's probably the biggest thing that I as a leader always advocate for. The more our partners know about our business, the better the outcome will actually be.
That's great. And, as far as working with your teams, I've heard you in the past, in past discussions, still reference, even though your 25th year of the company, not your 25th year, but the company's been around for 25 years, that in some ways you still operate as a startup, or you think of yourselves as a startup. Can you talk about that, and how do you balance when that kind of maybe you mature and say, well, we're no longer a startup. Like, when does that come about, and how does that affect how you operate internally?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways to think about this one, right? One of the things that I always think about is I start with the end user in mind first, right? When you sit here, you think about the fact that teenagers around the world, but let's just take this market, the one that we're sitting in right now, get braces still to this day, right? We are talking about not digital natives that are the older end of Gen Z, right? We're talking about Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha, who has grown up with swiping screens, only a mobile phone, can't recognize a rotary phone, is still getting metal cemented onto their teeth with wire threaded through. We then go to a healthcare professional and we pay that person to crank your metal wires, right? So that you can get straight teeth when there's a digital solution that you use digital every day of the week over analog in every other parts of your life, right? But yet, in orthodontics, parents pay somebody to crank this wire, right? And still use an analog process. And that happens over 90% of the time, right? So I think about that and I say, we are very much a startup because we haven't yet won the minds of the parents, of the teenagers, and the orthodontist to convince them that Invisalign is actually a solution that should be top of mind for everybody when that conversation actually occurs. So that's an example in one of our most mature markets. Let's go to another market around the world, right? And let's go to a market like Japan as an example, right? Another really digitally first market. And now let's take the adult business, right? You've got adults who are doing the same thing, right? Cementing metal, putting wires through, and paying somebody to go through this torturous experience and thinking that it's actually pleasant. So I think that, that's an example of we've got so much opportunity in markets around the world where we need to think like a startup, act like a startup, and really ensure that we are not settling for what one might think as success, but really just keep that fire burning.
That's great. I actually want to go back to something we started on, which was the various markets that you, the audiences, that you're targeting, and how. I'm curious to know how, like, if you're balancing kind of more of a B2B approach, right, with the doctors, and then you have the parents, and then you have teens. How do you help your teams, your internal teams, manage those different audiences? Because there's a lot of different creative approaches, and there are a lot of different tactical approaches, different media channels, and how do you go about organizing the team to accomplish that?
Yeah, I'll start with the B2B side, because that's one of the parts of healthcare that I think can be the not so sexy part, right? But one of the things that's really exciting about our B2B side of our business with the doctors, the customers that we work with, is they're all small business owners, right? At the end of the day. And we get the opportunity to actually work with each of these small business owners, understand what their goals are, understand the ins and outs of their business, and then help them through the solutions that we offer from a technology perspective, meet their individual business goals, right? So that's super exciting. And so one of the ways that we get to that balance, so to speak, or we help our teams get to that effectiveness aspect is back to the basics of marketing, right? Those brilliant basics of know your customer, know this person inside and out. Dr. Jason, right? What drives Dr. Jason? And then remember that doctors are consumers too. So the same aspects from a consumer marketing perspective of edutainment, create content that's entertaining, right? Help build some education into it. Anybody who builds boring content is not going to get the engagement that we're looking for.
It's similar to someone else who's on the advisory council, is a senior leader at Square. And a lot of times she talks about, well, their small business owners are their customers, but those are people too, right? And then, so I think that kind of dovetails nicely into talking about, how do you show up where you're customer or potential customer actually lives, works, and plays in their lifestyle. And maybe you want to talk about some of the partnerships that the company has engaged in to meet those customers where they are.
Yeah, I always say that the best brands are those brands that have intertwined themselves successfully with local culture, right? So be where your audience is. Find a way to get your brand into those conversations. And I'll give you an example, right? We know that our audiences, whether it's adult audience, whether it's a teen audience, they love sports. Right? It's a natural intersection for our brand too, because if anybody has braces and gets hit in the face with a ball, it's not as pleasant of an experience as one might have if you have Invisalign treatment. So it's
Still a ball to the face, though.
Still a ball in the face, but no metal to actually, disrupt your life, have that emergency appointment, etc. But so our goal becomes to find those natural intersections where the partnerships make sense for our brand. Now, it's not just about sponsorship, though, right? It's really easy to do a sponsorship. But really, it then comes down to how do you get yourself immersed and involved in the community? So I'll give you an example. We are a sponsor of the Golden State Warriors, right? We're in their town, so a relevant group to bring up. And it's not just a sponsorship we have with them, but we've actually deepened that partnership to become a part of their community aspects and their community relations. We worked with them just a few weeks ago to give youth in the area an opportunity to have basketball camps here at Chase Center. So that was a great example of how we're working with not just brands and partners that we could easily just be a sponsor of, but actually get more involved from a community aspect.
That's great. And community is a huge part of the Align culture. And I think that's something that you talk about as the tagline, right? Improving smiles, improving lives. Did I get that right?
Transforming smiles and changing lives.
Transforming smiles and changing lives. I wasn't close, folks. But community engagement, both domestically and on a global level, is a very important aspect of the company. And I'd like you to share with the audience here about how you guys think about that. And the reason it's important as a marketer.
Yeah, I think, so if you think about purpose, right, one of the reasons why it's important as a marketer is it's your North Star, right? It helps you make those decisions, especially when times are tough. Right? Because it's really easy when times are great, but when times are tough and you need to figure out what's my North Star, what decision do I take, that purpose is really what you look to. So our purpose, transforming smile, changing lives, is one that touches the end user, right? Really clearly, the impact that one has when their smile is one that they can be proud of and feel confident in their skin. There's a transformation that occurs there, and we hear all these powerful stories. But then we also have the aspect from a doctor standpoint, right? And all the work that they do in their local communities to transform smiles and change lives. And then we think about elevating that to organizations that we partner with. So we're a big supporter of Operation Smile worldwide, who works to change the smiles of individuals who are born with a cleft palate and enable surgeries for those individuals who may want it. And so it's just another example of how our purpose extends into various parts of who we are as a company.
That's great. So just everyone knows, have your questions ready, and just if you just want to raise your hand, I'll call on you even while we're speaking. And after this, we're going to be having a little bit of a networking break. I want to go, we touched upon, Sarah mentioned she loved the word innovation when she greeted everybody this morning. And what I'd like to know is, to you, what is marketing innovation all about? I think everyone has a different definition of what that means. I'd love to know how you think about marketing innovation and how do you evangelize that across your organization?
Sure. So the easiest way to think about innovation is to think product, right? And I think as marketers, that's our default. What's the new product? What's the new enhancement that's going to give me the opportunity to create a conversation or say something new in the marketplace, right? But I always think about innovation needing to extend beyond that, because let's be clear, how often is it that your product actually changes in a meaningful way that's going to be meaningful to your end user, right? So I think about innovation as what does that experience look like across the entire consumer journey? What does the unboxing experience look like? How do you go to market? How do you engage with this individual in new ways that may be driving some innovative thinking for your team? How do you create content in a different way in this world where there's always a creative drought because you can never have enough content to keep up with the, unsatisfied appetite of the consumer for content? How do you think about innovation for how you create content, as a marketing team? So I think it's extending beyond the product and thinking both from an operations standpoint as well as from an experience standpoint.
Yeah, as far as experience standpoint for the customer, you touched upon the customer journey, and I think that's something that's always evolving. I think it's an incredibly challenging task for marketers to be able to harness that customer journey and be able to touch those consumers in the right ways that ultimately leads to not only conversion but retention. And how do you think about customer journey, maybe, and how has it changed in any way over the last few years for your brand specifically?
Yeah, so we think about customer journey with respect to every individual who's involved in getting to that yes decision, right? So let's talk about parents and teens, right? It's not just the teenager's journey. We've got to think about mom's journey, dad's journey, and that journey that starts when the child is 7 and the doctor says, Johnny or Jane needs braces. Think about that language, right? We've got to unseed that language as far up as that moment at the pediatric dentist when that conversation first occurs and the word braces is cemented in the parent's head, right? So then the conversation for us becomes, once you map the consumer journey, it's not the brand's desired journey. And this is something that marketers do all the time, right? We get up on our whiteboard, we create our slides, and we say, here is the customer journey, the consumer journey, the customer journey, and it's usually the brand's desired journey. And I always say, no, let's back it up a second and let's put ourselves in the user's shoes, right? Especially at the very end when people always use the word advocacy. Again, brand's desired journey. The consumer's journey is probably best captured as express. The consumer's going to express their point of view. It may be a positive one. We sure hope it is, but it may be a negative one too.
So one more question for you, and then folks, if you want to have your questions ready for Kamal. Curious if we have a lot of kind of mid-level marketers here in the audience and a lot of senior level marketers as well. A lot of people look at the first half of the year and say, all right, well, how are we doing? How's our marketing plan going? Talk to us about how you approach optimizing and potentially changing things up halfway through a fiscal year. And what are some key things to think about as you evaluate, all right, how are we doing in the first, second half, and how can we do better moving forward? And what are the challenges do you change a lot over the course of the year based on your plan?
So I always say there's no such thing as an annual plan. Anybody who tries to tell you that there is an annual plan that you need to write every year and now we can't pivot because that's not in our plan, forget it. It's like time to run for the woods right then, right? So there's no such thing as an annual plan. I think the reality is stay rooted in who the audience is that you're trying to reach. Stay rooted in how do you get to yes, and then get as close as possible to your data as you can, right? Anytime there's somebody in between you and your data, it's time to take a closer look at how you might reimagine that situation, right? Because the closer you are to your data, the faster you can interpret that data, run experiments, understand what's working, dial that up, and understand what's not working. So as we're all sitting here in the second half of the year, right, I wouldn't plan for the second half because nobody knows what's going to happen, right? I'd plan for the next quarter and figure out, what do we know is working, dial that up. What do we know is not working, stop it immediately. There's no reason to continue to let it go. Try something else, right? But make sure that there's a measurement plan in place that everybody agrees to up front as a team, right? This is how we're going to measure success, whether this is working or not.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great question when everyone's kind of networking at our coffee break and at lunch, and when you meet your fellow marketers, is kind of talk about that, ask that question amongst each other. I think we all can learn from each other, which is the point of being here. And so I want to open up to some questions from the audience. Who's got the first one? Yes, in the back there.
James Salwasser with Outprint Media. The brand that's been around for 25 years, I would say maybe you're like the household brand of spacers and invisible liners. Where do you see that going? Like, there's D2C challenger brands now. Does that take into your market share? Does that affect how you think about the products that you're launching? And do you see innovation, and maybe eventually you'll have a D2C offering?
Yeah, so a couple of key questions in there, right? I think the first thing I'll say is when you think about innovation, right? The brand's been around for 25 years for sure. One of the things that we probably don't talk about enough from a consumer standpoint is just how much innovation continues to occur in the Invisalign clear aligner, right? When we first started 25 years ago, we couldn't treat teens. That came about many years ago now, but one of our more recent innovations was actually treating kids with a mixed dentition, both adult teeth and baby teeth, right? It's our Invisalign First product. So from an innovation perspective, one of the things I always think about as an innovator is we've got to continue to innovate, and we will always continue to innovate. I think the other thing that we always think about is at the end of the day, we are a B2B2C business, right? We wholeheartedly believe in the doctor being at the center of care.
Another question, yes.
Jamie Zimmerman, Media Matters. So being a B2B2C brand, how are you tracking against your audiences to know whether you need to dial up, optimize to more the B2B, your orthodontist and dentist versus your consumer?
I love seeing so many friends in this audience. I think this is great, people that I used to work with. So great question, Jamie. I think we've got, the way that we think about it is we look at both independently, and then we look at both together, and we see what is the most effective way for us to connect and win the hearts and minds of a doctor. That may be media. It may not be media. It may be a different marketing lever that we pull. And then on the consumer side, we know that we've got a job to do from a consumer standpoint with all of our audiences, adults, parents, and teens, to continue to raise the awareness and educate on the benefits of Invisalign aligners. And then it just becomes a question of which channels are our users most engaged in, right? If they're not engaged in a channel that's super sexy right now, we're not going to be in it. If they're engaged in a media channel that is super sexy, but we don't have the budget to effectively be a player in that channel, we won't enter, right? I used to have a leader that would always say, marketing is the art of sacrifice. And that is something I've held with me in my pocket for the longest time, because it's really easy to say yes and want to be everywhere, but be below threshold level. And you got to take a look at your budgets and do a bottoms-up approach and say, where's my next dollar going to go so that I can actually make a difference?
Any other questions before we break? God, we're right on time. I'm so punctual.
Perfect.
Any other questions? So thank you so much, Kamal. You've been such a big part of our community for so long, and we're really privileged to have you and to share with the audience what not only a very unique job, a very unique brand. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I would, yes, absolutely. And as we go into our break, I will challenge everybody to not just look at your work emails, but actually enjoy the time that we have with each other and meet each other. That's why we're all here. So back to you, Sarah.